The following is a deep dive podcast generated by Notebook LM based on content from my upcoming book. In this podcast, we answer this question. You've invested time, capital, and resources into a project, but how do you ensure it's delivering the returns you promised? And now, let's listen to the podcast.
Ever really pour yourself into a project,
Yeah.
You're super gung-ho at first, but then things fizzle out. And the worst part, trying to remember how you were going to prove it was even a good idea to begin with.
Yeah, it's kind of like that saying, easy to get caught up in the heat of the moment, harder to actually see the results after the dust settles.
It happens all the time, right? Today's deep dive is tackling that sneaky career saboteur, ROI amnesia. We'll figure out why it happens, how to avoid it, and maybe most importantly, how to keep proving that your work matters.
Totally. It's like, those fitness trackers everyone's wearing? What if we had that for our projects? Not just tracking steps, but tracking actual measurable value.
I like where you're going with this. But first, let's break down this whole ROI amnesia thing. What exactly are we talking about here?
Okay, so picture this. You've totally nailed it, right? You presented a killer business case, got the budget, maybe even celebrated the project launch with the team. Everyone's happy, but then crickets. No one's actually keeping track of whether the project is doing what it was supposed to do.
So it's not that the project is doomed from the start, but more like we floored it without checking the gas gauge.
Exactly. We're so focused on getting the thing off the ground that we forget to check if it's actually flying. And that can lead to some, well, let's call them learning experiences.
And probably some awkward conversations with, certain people who might ask, so about that project you were so excited about.
Speaking of awkward conversations, let's talk about why ignoring this whole ROI tracking thing can backfire, and not just because you miss a chance to toot your own horn.
Hit me with the worst case scenario. What's the worst that can happen?
Well, imagine this. You put your heart and soul into this project, right? Your team is working crazy hours, you're burning through the budget, and then you realize months later that it's not actually delivering what you promised.
Yeah, talk about a punch to the gut. How do you even begin to explain that to, the people who need to see those results?
It's beyond tough. It can be a career killer. Because when you can't actually prove your project is worth the investment, it's all just talk,
Mm-hmm.
And unfortunately...
Trust me, only gets you so far.
Exactly. Especially these days, leaders who can't back up their claims with cold, hard data. They're not the ones getting ahead. Let me put it that way.
Okay, so how do we avoid becoming that cautionary tale? How do we escape this ROI amnesia? You got to have a plan, right?
You know what they say, what gets measured gets managed. It's all about building those good habits.
So where do we even begin? Give me that first step.
Remember that business case you poured over? Time to dust it off.
Okay, I'm picturing mine right now. Little dusty, maybe a coffee stain or two.
The important thing is to actually open it up, because buried inside are those key metrics you use to justify the project in the first place. What were those big goals? Increase customer satisfaction, reduce those operational costs.
Those North Star metrics everyone was so excited about at the beginning.
Exactly. And instead of letting them fade into oblivion, we're going to create a value tracker.
Okay, I love this. Like a fitness tracker, but for my projects.
I like the way you think. But instead of steps and calories, we're tracking our progress against those key performance indicators. Are we hitting those targets? Crushing them? Falling behind? This gives you a much clearer picture of how things are actually going.
And this isn't just about, covering your tracks, right? It's got to be more proactive than that.
100%. This regular monitoring helps you become a problem solver before things even become problems. What if you notice a metric isn't where it needs to be? Having that data early on lets you adjust, make changes. You become way more agile.
Instead of scrambling for answers later, it's like, hey, I'm on top of this. I've got the data right here, and here's what we're doing about it.
Now you're thinking strategically. But here's an even crazier thought. What if we wove this value tracking into every single project right from the get-go?
Now you're speaking my language.
Yeah.
How do we make ROI tracking an essential part of our planning? Instead of, oh yeah, I forgot about that. So we're talking about building this value tracking thing into the DNA of our projects, right? From the very beginning. How do we do that?
Think of it like this. Every time you create a business case, you're not just outlining what you want to achieve. You're actually laying out a plan for how you're going to prove you achieved it.
So it's like building in a measurement system right there in the blueprint.
Exactly. And here's the thing. When you go to leadership with that clear plan for measuring success, it shows them you're serious. It says, hey, I'm not just here to get this project approved. I'm going to own this thing.
It's like, I'm not just bringing you an idea, I'm bringing you a results tracking machine.
Now you've got it. And that does something really powerful. It builds trust with the people who need to see those results. It shows you're thinking strategically about every dollar and every hour. And honestly, that's how you stand out.
It's that old saying, what gets measured gets managed.
Right. But it's more than just managing, it's about leading. It's about being able to say, this is the impact we're making, and here are the numbers to prove it.
So to wrap up this deep dive on ROI amnesia, it's time to say goodbye to those launch and forget days. We're embracing a totally different mindset, one where we're constantly tracking, measuring, and shouting from the rooftops about the value of our work.
Because at the end of the day, it's not about bragging rights. It's about proving that what we do makes a difference, that the projects we pour our hearts into are worth every ounce of effort.
And who knows, maybe we'll even inspire a few colleagues to ditch their own ROI amnesia along the way. So until next time, keep those projects on track, those metrics soaring high, and that value crystal clear.
So there it is. What do you think? To recap, we covered 1. Understanding ROI amnesia. 2. The importance of a value tracker. And 3. Building a value audit plan for future success. Number 1. Understanding ROI amnesia. Many companies justify large investments with strong ROI projections, but once the project is deployed, they fail to track if the forecasted value is actually achieved. This can lead to ROI amnesia, where the initial goals and outcomes of the project are forgotten, putting both resources and reputations at risk. Number 2. The importance of a value tracker. We introduced the concept of a value tracker, a straightforward framework that monitors key metrics in real time. By actively measuring and adjusting the project's performance, companies can avoid lost value and ensure accountability well after the initial deployment. And number 3, building a value audit plan for future success. Looking ahead, each business case should include measurable benefits and a value audit plan to track the actual returns from investments over time. This approach not only protects the project's long-term impact, but also builds trust and credibility for those leading these initiatives. This is the Communicating Value Podcast. My name is Paul, and I'm the Value Coach. Thanks for joining.